Hey guys, tonight we travel back in time, to the golden sands of ancient Egypt, to a queen whose name has echoed through history for more than 2,000 years. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, the secret life of Cleopatra. Before we begin, take one slow breath in and gently out. If you enjoy calm historical journeys like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and become part of this peaceful history community. And tell me something interesting at this very moment. Which city are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing where in the world these quiet stories travel. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let us step softly into the ancient world. When most people hear the name Cleopatra, they imagine beauty, luxury, gold, milk baths, powerful Roman generals kneeling at her feet. But tonight, we move more slowly, because Cleopatra was not born as a legend. She was born into danger. She entered the world in 69 BCE in the city of Alexandria, a city unlike any other on Earth at the time. Alexandria was not just Egyptian, it was Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Jewish, Roman, a city of languages, of scholars, of merchants whispering prices in crowded markets, of sailors arriving from distant lands. And above it all stood the royal palace, white stone glowing in the Mediterranean sun. Cleopatra was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty. Now this is important. Her family was not originally Egyptian. They were descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals, Greek rulers, sitting on an Egyptian throne. For nearly 300 years her family ruled Egypt, but they never truly became Egyptian. They spoke Greek, they married their own siblings, they lived inside palace walls, separate from the people they ruled. But Cleopatra would be different. From childhood, she was not ordinary. While other royal children were surrounded by servants and silk, Cleopatra was watching, listening, learning. She was educated in philosophy, astronomy, politics, mathematics, but most importantly, she learned languages, many languages, Greek of course, but also Egyptian, something her ancestors rarely bothered to learn, and then Hebrew, Arabic, possibly even Latin. She understood something early in life. Power does not only belong to armies, it belongs to communication. And Cleopatra listened more than she spoke. But while she studied scrolls and languages, outside the palace, her family was collapsing. Her father, King Ptolemy XII, was not a strong ruler. He depended heavily on Rome. He paid enormous bribes to Roman leaders just to remain on the throne. And when he could not pay, the people of Egypt grew angry. There were protests, whispers of rebellion. Eventually, her father fled Egypt. Imagine that moment. A young princess, watching her father escape in fear, the throne unstable, the streets restless, the future uncertain. Cleopatra learned something very important during these years. Royal blood does not guarantee safety. Only strategy does. Eventually, with Roman military help, her father returned to power, but the message was clear. Rome controlled everything. Egypt was rich, yes, but Rome was powerful, and young Cleopatra understood this better than anyone. When her father finally died, Cleopatra was only 18 years old. 18, and suddenly she was queen. But there was a condition. According to tradition, she had to marry her younger brother. He was only 10 years old. His name was Ptolemy XIII. They would rule together, but make no mistake, Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power. At first, she tried diplomacy. Coins were minted showing both of their faces. Official documents carried both names. But slowly, Cleopatra began appearing alone. Her image grew larger, her presence more dominant. She was testing the waters, and the court noticed. Power in ancient Egypt was delicate. The royal advisors, older, experienced men, didn't like a young woman taking control. Soon, tension grew inside the palace walls. Whispers turned into plans, and then Cleopatra was forced into exile. Imagine it. At 18 years old, a queen without a throne, she fled Egypt, but she did not give up. Instead, she waited. In exile, she gathered support. She built alliances. She studied Rome's politics carefully, and then fate moved. Because at that exact time, Rome itself was in chaos. A civil war had broken out between two powerful men, Julius Caesar and Pompey. When Pompey fled to Egypt seeking safety, he was betrayed and killed. And shortly after, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria. This moment, this single moment, would change Cleopatra's life forever. Because Cleopatra understood something brilliant. If she could win Caesar's support, she could win back Egypt. But she could not simply walk into the palace. Her enemies controlled it. So she did something bold, something unforgettable. According to legend, she had herself smuggled into the palace, wrapped inside a carpet. Picture that scene slowly. Nighttime, torches flickering, guards at attention, a rolled carpet carried into Caesar's chambers, unrolled, and out steps a young queen, not screaming, not begging, but confident, calm, strategic. That was Cleopatra's true power. Not beauty, not seduction, intelligence. She understood psychology, she understood timing, and she understood men like Caesar. From that moment, everything began to shift. But that is where we pause tonight. Let your breathing slow. Imagine the quiet halls of the Alexandrian palace, the flicker of candlelight, the soft Mediterranean air drifting through open windows, an exiled queen, now standing before the most powerful man in Rome. Take a slow breath in and gently let it go. The torches inside the palace burn low. Outside, the Mediterranean Sea moves quietly against the harbour walls of Alexandria. Inside a private chamber, a rolled carpet is unfastened. Fabric loosens, and out steps a young queen, Cleopatra, only 21 years old, standing before one of the most powerful men in the world, Julius Caesar. Now, history often tells this moment quickly, dramatically, but tonight we slow it down, because what happened next was not magic, it was strategy. Caesar was not easily impressed. He was in his early 50s, a general, a politician, a man who had seen war, betrayal, ambition, and fear in every form. He did not need beauty. He needed stability. He needed Egypt. And Cleopatra understood that. She did not throw herself at his feet. She did not beg for rescue. Instead, she offered him something far more valuable: control. Egypt was rich, extremely rich. Its grain fed Rome. Its treasury could fund armies. Its ports connected continents. If Caesar helped Cleopatra reclaim the throne, he would secure Rome's supply lines and remove instability from a fragile region. It was a political alliance first. Everything else came later. But outside those palace walls, tension was rising. Cleopatra's younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and his advisors were furious. They had expected Caesar to support them. Instead, he seemed interested in Cleopatra. And so, the palace became a quiet battlefield, not of swords at first, but of influence. Caesar announced he would mediate between the siblings. He summoned both to appear before him. Cleopatra arrived confident. Ptolemy arrived surrounded by advisors, older men, whispering into the ear of a boy king. But Cleopatra had something they did not: presence. She spoke directly to Caesar, not as a child, not as a desperate exile, but as a ruler. She emphasized loyalty to Rome. She emphasized stability. She emphasized partnership. Caesar listened, and then something bold happened. He declared that both siblings would rule together as originally intended. But everyone understood what this meant. Caesar would remain in Alexandria, with his soldiers, and effectively protect Cleopatra. This angered Ptolemy's supporters, and soon the conflict became open war. The streets of Alexandria grew tense. Roman soldiers clashed with Egyptian forces. Ships burned in the harbour. Smoke drifted into the sky. The great city trembled under the weight of politics. Cleopatra stayed close to Caesar during this time, not hiding, not passive. She observed everything. War was not new to her family, but this was different. This was Rome. Eventually the fighting escalated. Ptolemy XIII attempted to flee during battle, but fate was not kind. His boat capsized in the Nile, and he drowned. Just like that. The boy king was gone. Cleopatra had no more immediate rival. Rome declared her queen. But there was still a formality. She married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as tradition required. Yet this time there was no illusion of shared power. Cleopatra ruled, and Caesar remained in Egypt longer than anyone expected. Months passed. He could have returned to Rome immediately, but he did not. Instead, he stayed in Alexandria, with Cleopatra. They travelled along the Nile together. Imagine that journey slowly. A royal barge floating down the ancient river. Palm trees lining the banks. Priests watching from temple steps. The queen and the Roman general sailing under golden sunlight. For Cleopatra, this was more than romance. It was visibility. The Egyptian people saw her, not hidden behind palace walls, but on the sacred Nile. She presented herself as the living goddess Isis, a divine ruler, strong, fertile, protected by Rome. And then she became pregnant. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. His name was Ptolemy XV, but the world would know him as Caesarion, Little Caesar. Whether Caesar officially acknowledged him as his son remains debated by historians, but in Egypt, Cleopatra made the message clear. This child represented unity between Rome and Egypt, a future that connected two empires. Caesar eventually had to return to Rome. Politics there were unstable. Enemies were watching. But before leaving, he ensured Cleopatra's position was secure. Roman troops remained stationed in Egypt, and Cleopatra remained on the throne. Now here is something interesting. Cleopatra did something unusual soon after. She travelled to Rome. This was bold. A foreign queen entering the heart of the Republic. She did not hide. She stayed in one of Caesar's villas. Statues of her were reportedly placed in temples, Roman society whispered. Some admired her intelligence. Others feared her influence, because Rome was not comfortable with queens. Rome had overthrown kings centuries earlier. The very word monarch felt dangerous, and here was Cleopatra, living openly with Caesar, bringing her son, representing royalty. Many Roman senators grew uncomfortable. They feared Caesar wanted to become king, and Cleopatra became a symbol of that fear. Then came the Ides of March, 44 BCE. Caesar was assassinated, stabbed by senators inside the theatre of Pompey. When news reached Cleopatra, everything changed again. Her protector was gone. Her position in Rome became dangerous overnight, so she left, quietly, returning to Egypt with Caesarion. Back in Alexandria, she faced a new reality. Rome would not disappear. It would reorganize. Power would shift. And once again, Cleopatra would need to choose carefully who to support, who to trust, who to align with. Because survival, for her, was never about love. It was about foresight. And Rome was entering another civil war. This time between three men: Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir; Mark Antony, a powerful general; and Lepidus, a lesser but influential leader. Together they formed the Second Triumvirate. But alliances in Rome never stayed peaceful for long. Cleopatra watched from Egypt, listening, waiting, studying. She knew Rome's next ruler would determine Egypt's fate. And then a message arrived. Mark Antony requested her presence. He summoned her to meet him in Tarsus. Many rulers would have gone quickly, nervously, but Cleopatra understood performance. She did not simply travel. She staged an arrival, a golden barge, purple sails, perfumed air drifting over the water. She dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love. When Antony saw her, it was not just beauty he witnessed. It was confidence, the confidence of a queen who had already survived exile, war, and Rome itself. But that is where we slow down again, because their story is even more dramatic than the first. For now, imagine the river at dusk, candles flickering along the edges of a royal barge, music playing softly, a Roman general watching from the shore, and a queen who knows exactly the effect she is creating. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. The year is 41 BCE. The Roman world is restless, and on the smooth waters of the Cydnus River, a golden barge glides forward. Cleopatra stands beneath silk sails dyed deep purple, a colour so rare it was once worth more than gold. Perfume drifts across the water, music plays softly, and waiting on the shore is Mark Antony. Now, before we go further, let us understand Antony. He was not like Julius Caesar. Caesar was calculated, controlled, political. Antony was different. He was bold, emotional, charismatic, a soldier's soldier, loved by his men, feared by his enemies, and known for indulgence, feasts, wine, luxury. Cleopatra knew exactly who she was meeting. When Antony first summoned her to Tarsus, it was not an invitation. It was a test. He wanted to question her loyalty. After all, she had supported Caesar, and Rome had just survived another brutal civil war. Antony needed money. He needed allies. He needed Egypt. But when Cleopatra arrived, she did not act like someone under suspicion. She did not hurry to explain herself. Instead, she invited Antony onto her ship. She turned the interrogation into an encounter. They dined together, talked long into the evening, and slowly, a partnership began to form. But let us move carefully here. History often describes this as a grand romance. And yes, there was passion, but there was also politics. Cleopatra saw in Antony something powerful. He controlled Rome's eastern territories. He commanded armies. If she secured his support, Egypt would remain independent. Antony saw in Cleopatra something equally valuable: wealth, ships, grain, and a ruler who understood strategy. Soon, Antony followed her back to Alexandria, and that winter became famous. They formed something called the Inimitable Livers, a private society devoted to pleasure, lavish banquets, endless wine, games and performances. They dressed as gods, walked among their people at night in disguise, laughed loudly, lived boldly. But beneath the indulgence, serious decisions were being made. Cleopatra gave Antony what he needed: money for campaigns, ships for war, and Antony gave Cleopatra territory. He granted her lands across the eastern Mediterranean, parts of Cyprus, coastal Syria, even regions of modern-day Lebanon. Egypt was expanding again, for the first time in generations, and Cleopatra was no longer just surviving, she was rising. In 40 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Later a third child would follow, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Her family was growing, her dynasty strengthening, but far away in Rome. Another man was watching, Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, cold, strategic, patient. Unlike Antony, Octavian did not rush. He studied. He built alliances quietly, and he understood something important. Antony's relationship with Cleopatra could be used against him. Because Rome did not like foreign queens. Rome did not trust monarchies, and Antony was spending more and more time in Egypt. Rumours spread that he had abandoned Roman values, that he was controlled by Cleopatra, that he was becoming Eastern in his habits. Octavian began shaping a narrative. He told the Roman people that Antony was betraying them, that he planned to move Rome's power to Alexandria, that Cleopatra wanted to rule Rome. Whether these claims were true or exaggerated, they were effective. Public opinion slowly turned. Meanwhile, Cleopatra and Antony continued building their alliance. In 34 BCE came a dramatic event, the donations of Alexandria. This ceremony was extraordinary. In a grand public display, Antony declared territories for Cleopatra and their children. Cleopatra was named Queen of Kings. Caesarion was declared the true heir of Julius Caesar. This was a bold move, and a dangerous one, because in Rome, Octavian claimed to be Caesar's rightful successor. By elevating Caesarion, Antony had challenged Octavian directly. It was no longer private tension, it was open rivalry. War was approaching, but inside Alexandria, life still moved in rhythm with the Nile. Cleopatra continued presenting herself as Isis, a divine mother, a powerful queen. Her children were displayed as future rulers. She was building an image of stability and destiny. Yet she knew something many did not. Rome always devoured rivals. Always. No matter how charming, no matter how powerful. The question was not whether Rome would attack. It was when. Antony eventually returned to Rome briefly, under pressure, and in an attempt to calm tensions, he married Octavian's sister, Octavia, a political marriage designed to restore peace. Cleopatra remained in Egypt during this time, waiting, observing, and perhaps calculating. Because she understood Antony's nature. He was loyal to emotion, not to strategy alone, and eventually he returned to her, leaving Octavia behind. For Octavian this was perfect. He now had proof that Antony chose Egypt over Rome, proof that Cleopatra influenced him. The Roman Senate grew uneasy. Speeches were delivered, accusations made, and slowly, war became inevitable. But this war would not be declared against Antony directly. No, Octavian declared war on Cleopatra, framing it as Rome defending itself from a foreign queen. A subtle move, but powerful, and Cleopatra knew. The final act was beginning. Imagine Alexandria now, the palace glowing under evening light, servants moving quietly through marble halls, children playing somewhere in distant rooms, Cleopatra standing alone on a balcony, looking out toward the sea, knowing that Roman ships would soon appear on that horizon, not as allies, but as enemies. She had gambled everything, on Caesar once, on Antony now, and this time the stakes were higher, because she was not only protecting herself, she was protecting her children, her dynasty, her Egypt. In the next part, we move toward the Battle of Actium, the sea, the fire, the turning point that would decide the fate of a queen. But for now, let the tension soften. Picture the warm Egyptian night, the quiet ripple of water against stone, a queen who has climbed from exile to power, standing at the edge of destiny. History is holding its breath, and so can you, slowly, gently, until sleep arrives. Take a slow, steady breath in, and let it drift out slowly. The Mediterranean is quiet tonight, but not for long. The year is 31 BCE. For years, tension has been building between Mark Antony and Octavian. Words have been exchanged, accusations spread, alliances tested, and now, war can no longer be avoided. Octavian has declared war, officially against Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. But everyone understands the truth. This is a war for Rome itself, for control, for legacy, for the future of an empire. Cleopatra and Antony gather their forces. Ships are constructed, soldiers are trained, supplies are stored carefully. The fleet assembles near the western coast of Greece, near a place called Actium. It is here that history will turn. Now pause for a moment. Imagine the shoreline. Hundreds of ships resting in the water, wood creaking softly, sails folded neatly, oars stacked in perfect rows. On one side, Octavian's fleet, commanded by his brilliant general Agrippa, disciplined, organised, strategic. On the other side, Antony and Cleopatra's combined forces, large ships, impressive in size, decorated with gold and Egyptian symbols, but heavier, slower, and perhaps less unified. Inside her flagship, Cleopatra stands quietly. She is no stranger to danger. She has faced exile, civil war, Roman politics, but this is different. This is not palace strategy. This is open sea, and the outcome cannot be negotiated afterward. Antony moves among his commanders, trying to inspire confidence. He is still charismatic, still powerful, but there is strain beneath the surface. Supplies are running low, desertions have occurred, some allies have quietly switched sides to Octavian. Morale is not what it once was. Cleopatra must have sensed it. She always sensed shifts in power, but retreat now would look like weakness, and weakness invites destruction. So they prepare for battle. September 2nd. Dawn rises slowly over Actium. Mist floats gently above the water. The sea appears calm, almost peaceful. Then horns sound, drums beat, oars hit water, the fleets begin to move. Octavian's ships are smaller, lighter. They maneuver quickly. Agrippa uses strategy over brute force. He avoids direct heavy collision. Instead, he isolates ships, cuts off escape routes. For hours, the battle stretches on. Smoke rises, wood splinters, men shout over crashing waves. Cleopatra's fleet remains slightly behind Antony's main line. Her ships carry treasure, gold, silver, the wealth of Egypt. And then, something unexpected happens. Cleopatra's ships turn, they catch the wind, and begin sailing away from the battle. Historians still debate this moment. Was it planned? Was it panic? Was it strategy? Did Antony know beforehand? Or was he surprised? What we do know is this. When Cleopatra's fleet withdrew, Antony made a choice. He followed her, leaving the battlefield behind, leaving thousands of soldiers still fighting. This decision changed everything. Without Antony's leadership, his forces collapsed. Octavian claimed victory. Actium was lost, and with it, the future of Antony and Cleopatra. Now, imagine that retreat. Cleopatra's ships moving quickly across open sea, the sound of battle fading behind them. Antony boarding her vessel, two leaders standing together in silence, the weight of defeat settling in. What passed between them in that moment? Blame, regret, fear, or quiet understanding? We cannot know, but we can imagine the heaviness. They sailed back to Egypt, not as victors, but as rulers who now faced inevitable invasion. Octavian did not rush. He moved carefully, securing territories, winning support, preparing final conquest. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, Cleopatra began preparing for a different kind of future. She did not collapse in despair. She planned. She stored treasures in her mausoleum, a grand tomb she had already begun constructing. She considered alliances, even perhaps negotiations with Octavian. Some accounts suggest she tried to open communication, testing whether survival was still possible. But Octavian had learned from history. He would not make the same mistake Caesar did. He would not allow Cleopatra to regain influence. Antony, meanwhile, struggled deeply. The defeat at Actium damaged his reputation. Roman support evaporated. Allies abandoned him. His confidence weakened. The once bold general now faced humiliation. Still, Cleopatra remained composed. Publicly, she continued ceremonies, continued presenting strength, continued acting as queen. Because appearances matter, even in defeat, especially in defeat. Months passed. Octavian's forces moved closer. Cities surrendered without resistance. The circle tightened around Egypt, and then, in 30 BCE, Octavian entered Egyptian territory. Alexandria prepared for siege. Antony attempted one final defence, one last effort to protect what remained. But his forces were exhausted, defeats mounted quickly, and rumours began spreading through the city. Rumours that Cleopatra had already surrendered. Rumours that she was negotiating privately, whether true or false. They reached Antony, and in despair, believing Cleopatra had betrayed him, he made a tragic decision. But that is where we pause tonight. The Sea of Actium is quiet again. Smoke long gone, ships resting beneath deep water. The battle finished, but the story not yet over. A queen returns to her palace. A general questions everything. And Rome stands at the gates of Egypt. Take a slow breath in, hold it gently, and let it go. The year is 30 BCE. Alexandria no longer feels invincible. The city that once glittered with music, philosophy, and golden ceremonies now waits in silence. Octavian's forces are approaching. Roman banners move steadily closer. Inside the palace walls, tension hangs in the air. Mark Antony, once a feared general of Rome, is no longer surrounded by cheering soldiers. Allies have disappeared. Armies have surrendered. Only fragments remain. And then, a rumour spreads. Antony hears that Cleopatra has taken her own life, that she has locked herself inside her mausoleum, that she has chosen death over capture. Overwhelmed by grief and despair, Antony makes a tragic decision. He falls upon his own sword, but the wound does not end his life immediately. He is still alive, still breathing. And then the truth reaches him. Cleopatra is not dead. She is alive, inside her monument. When Cleopatra hears what Antony has done, she sends word to bring him to her, but the doors are sealed. The mausoleum is locked from the inside. There is no easy entrance, so Antony is lifted. Ropes are lowered from a high window, and Cleopatra herself, along with her attendants, pulls him upward. Imagine that moment. The once great Roman general, bleeding and weak, being lifted into the arms of the Queen of Egypt, not on a battlefield, but inside a tomb built for eternity. Antony dies there, in her arms, and with his death, the last real defence of Egypt falls. Octavian soon enters Alexandria, carefully, strategically. He does not rush to destroy. He wants control, and more importantly, he wants Cleopatra alive, because a living queen can be displayed, paraded in Rome, a symbol of victory. Cleopatra understands this immediately. She knows Roman triumphs. She knows what happens to defeated rulers. They are marched through the streets in chains, mocked, displayed before execution. She had seen it before, and she will not allow it for herself. Octavian meets her. Accounts describe their encounter as calm, measured. Cleopatra dresses simply, not as a goddess, not in gold, but as a dignified queen. She attempts negotiation, perhaps for her children's safety, perhaps for a small preserved kingdom, perhaps even considering survival in exile. But Octavian has already decided. Egypt will become a Roman province. There will be no independent queen. However, he still needs her alive, and Cleopatra realizes something very important. If she lives, she loses everything. If she dies, she controls the ending, and Cleopatra always preferred control. Now we come to the most famous moment of her life, the story told for over 2,000 years, the asp, a small Egyptian cobra, hidden in a basket of figs. According to tradition, Cleopatra allowed the snake to bite her. A quiet death, a royal death. But historians debate this. Some suggest poison hidden in a comb. Others believe multiple toxins. What matters is this. On August 12th, 30 BCE, Cleopatra chose her final act. She was around 39 years old. When Octavian's soldiers entered her chamber, she was already gone, dressed regally, laid beside her loyal attendants, calm, still, as if sleeping. Octavian was reportedly furious, not because she died, but because she denied him spectacle. She denied him the satisfaction of displaying her in Rome. Instead, she became legend. Her son Caesarion was captured soon after and executed, ending the Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. Egypt officially became part of the Roman Empire, and Octavian would soon take a new name, Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. But here is something gentle to remember as you drift towards sleep. Cleopatra was not simply a seductress, not just a romantic figure, not merely a dramatic ending. She was multilingual, educated, politically sharp, strategic in survival, the last ruler of an ancient civilization standing against a rising empire. For over 20 years she kept Egypt independent in a world dominated by Rome. That is not small, that is not accidental, and in her final decision, she ensured that her story would never fade quietly. Now imagine Alexandria one last time. The palace halls empty, the Nile flowing steadily as it always has, stars reflecting on dark water. Empires rise, empires fall, but the river continues, and somewhere in history's quiet pages, a queen rests, not defeated, but remembered. Take one more slow breath. Feel the calm, let the ancient world soften into silence, and allow sleep to carry you gently. As the last queen of Egypt fades into legend, take a slow breath in, and let it go gently. Cleopatra is gone. Egypt is no longer ruled by its own queen, and Rome now controls the Nile. But something interesting happens after her death. Instead of fading into silence, her story grows louder. Octavian, now calling himself Augustus, returns to Rome as a victor. He presents himself as the saviour of Rome, the man who defeated a dangerous foreign queen, the woman who, according to his version of events, tried to corrupt Rome, tried to control its generals, tried to steal its future. And so the official Roman story begins. Cleopatra becomes a symbol, not of intelligence, not of leadership, but of temptation, of excess, of Eastern luxury. It is politically convenient. By blaming Cleopatra, Augustus protects Rome's image. Antony is not weak. He was enchanted. Rome was not divided. It was threatened. It is a powerful narrative, and for generations, that story spreads. Roman poets write about her. Historians describe her dramatically. Always beautiful, always dangerous, always dramatic, but rarely complex. Centuries pass. The Roman Empire rises higher, then eventually falls. Egypt changes rulers many times, Byzantines, Arabs, Ottomans, Europeans, but Cleopatra's name remains. And then something fascinating happens. During the Renaissance in Europe, artists rediscover the ancient world. They paint Cleopatra again. Dramatic scenes, golden rooms, a snake in her hand. Shakespeare writes about her in the play Antony and Cleopatra. In his version, she is passionate, tragic, magnetic, almost larger than life. Later, in the 20th century, Hollywood brings her back once more. In 1963, the film Cleopatra stars Elizabeth Taylor. Grand costumes, massive sets, an unforgettable entrance into Rome. Again, she's portrayed as stunning, seductive, powerful, but always centered around romance. What often gets softened is her intellect. She spoke multiple languages fluently. Unlike many rulers of her dynasty, she learned Egyptian. She negotiated directly with foreign leaders. She understood naval power, economic control, public image, religious symbolism. She ruled during one of the most dangerous political eras in Mediterranean history, and she survived for decades. That takes more than charm. It takes precision. Now, as you rest, imagine Cleopatra not as a dramatic movie scene, but as a real human being. A young girl around 18 years old suddenly thrown into civil war. A ruler navigating Rome's chaos. a mother protecting her children, a strategist watching empires shift like desert sand. History is often written by the winners, and in her case, Rome won, so Rome shaped the story. But modern historians look more carefully. They examine coins with her image, sharp features, strong nose, confident expression, not the soft fantasy of paintings, but the face of a ruler. Archaeologists continue searching for her tomb even today. Some believe it may lie near Alexandria, possibly near a temple dedicated to Isis, but it has not yet been confirmed, and perhaps there is something poetic about that. A queen who controlled her image in life, still keeping one final mystery in death. Now, let your thoughts slow. Picture the Nile at sunrise, soft gold light touching water, palm trees moving slightly in warm air, the Library of Alexandria, once filled with scrolls and whispers of knowledge, the harbour where her ships once stood ready. Cleopatra lived at the edge of two worlds, ancient Egypt and rising Rome, and when those worlds collided, she stood in the centre. Her life reminds us of something quiet but powerful. Even when empires fall, stories endure, and sometimes the story becomes stronger than the empire itself. Take a final slow breath. Feel the calm weight of history settling gently. The queen has stepped into legend. The empire has faded into time. The river continues flowing, and you can drift peacefully into sleep. The story is complete. Take a slow breath in, hold it softly, and let it go. The dramatic story is over. The battles have ended. The queen has made her final choice. But now, we quietly ask a different question. Who was Cleopatra when no one was watching? Not the Roman propaganda, not the Shakespearean drama, not the Hollywood spectacle, just the woman. Cleopatra VII was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek ruling family that had governed Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. For nearly 300 years her family ruled Egypt, but they were not Egyptian by blood. They were Macedonian Greek. Most Ptolemaic rulers did not even learn the Egyptian language, but Cleopatra did. She reportedly spoke several languages, possibly 9, Greek, Egyptian, Latin, and others used in diplomacy. That alone tells us something important. She prepared herself. She understood that language is power. Imagine her as a young girl in the palace of Alexandria. Scrolls everywhere, tutors speaking in different tongues, maps of the Mediterranean spread across tables, news arriving constantly from Rome, civil wars, assassinations, power shifts. She grew up knowing one thing: Egypt survived only by understanding Rome. Her father, Ptolemy XII, depended heavily on Roman support, and when he died, Cleopatra was only around 18 years old. Young, but already trained in politics. Soon, she faced her first crisis. Her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, became co-ruler, as tradition required. But palace advisors pushed him against her. Cleopatra was forced into exile. Imagine that moment. A young queen, removed from her throne, watching her own kingdom from a distance. But she did not disappear. She gathered support. She waited. And when opportunity came, in the form of Julius Caesar arriving in Egypt, she acted. The famous story says she entered the palace wrapped in a carpet. Whether that detail is fully accurate or slightly dramatized, what matters is the boldness. She chose presence over fear, strategy over retreat. That pattern continued throughout her life. When she aligned with Mark Antony, it was not only romance, it was political survival. Egypt needed protection. Rome needed grain. Alliances were currency. But beyond strategy, there was also culture. Cleopatra embraced Egyptian religious symbolism. She associated herself with the goddess Isis. She appeared in ceremonies dressed traditionally. She presented herself not as a foreign ruler, but as the true pharaoh, and that was powerful. Because leadership is not only military, it is psychological, it is symbolic. Now, pause. And picture Cleopatra not on a battlefield, not in a dramatic final scene, but sitting quietly in her palace at night, oil lamps flickering, advisors dismissed, the Mediterranean breeze entering through open windows. What thoughts filled her mind? Did she ever feel fear? Did she ever wish for a simpler life? Did she ever grow tired of constantly calculating alliances? We rarely ask these questions. History often turns people into symbols, but symbols were once human. Cleopatra lived in constant uncertainty. Rome could invade at any moment. A single wrong alliance could destroy everything, and yet she ruled for over 2 decades. That is not the mark of weakness. That is endurance. And here is something quietly remarkable. She was the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt. After her death, the line ended. The temples remained, the pyramids remained, but the era of Egyptian kingship ended with her. That is a heavy title. The last queen. The final chapter of a civilization's independence. And yet, when many people think of Cleopatra today, they think of beauty, of seduction, of romance, not governance, not economic management, not naval strategy. It shows how stories can shrink complexity. But as you rest tonight, you can hold a fuller picture, a multilingual ruler, a strategist balancing 2 superpowers, a mother of 4 children, a woman navigating one of history's most dangerous political landscapes. She did not control the final outcome, but she influenced the course of Rome itself. Without Cleopatra, there might not have been Augustus as emperor so soon. The Roman Republic might have lasted longer. History is full of invisible turning points, and Cleopatra stood at one of them. Now, let your breathing slow again. Imagine the Nile flowing steadily under moonlight, temples casting long shadows, a queen walking quietly through marble halls, not as myth, not as legend, but as a human being shaped by extraordinary times. The empire has faded, the propaganda has softened, the movies have dimmed, but somewhere in history's quiet memory, Cleopatra still stands, not merely as a story of love and loss, but as the final guardian of an ancient throne. Take one last slow breath and drift gently into peaceful sleep. Take a slow breath in and slowly let it go. Cleopatra is gone, but Egypt remains. The Nile still rises and falls. The desert winds still move across the sand. Temples still stand beneath the sun. Yet something has changed forever. In 30 BCE, after Cleopatra's death, Egypt does not become just another Roman territory. It becomes the personal property of one man, Augustus. He does something unusual. Instead of allowing Roman senators to govern Egypt, he keeps it under his direct control. Why? Because Egypt is wealthy. Its grain feeds Rome. Its gold strengthens the treasury. Its location connects trade between Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Egypt is too valuable to risk political rivals gaining influence there, so Roman governors are appointed carefully. No senator may enter Egypt without permission. It is a quiet sign of how important Cleopatra's kingdom truly was. Now imagine Alexandria after her death. The palace where she once walked is now occupied by Roman officials. The royal symbols are replaced. Roman banners rise where Egyptian ones once stood. Latin joins Greek in government records. Taxes are reorganized. Armies are stationed permanently. But daily life for ordinary people does not suddenly collapse. Farmers still work along the Nile. Merchants still sell spices, papyrus, glass. Scholars still study in Alexandria. Empires change slowly on the surface of daily life. Yet culturally, something subtle shifts. The pharaoh is gone. For thousands of years, Egypt believed its ruler was divine, a living connection between gods and people. Now, authority comes from far away, from Rome, from an emperor who has never walked the Nile's banks. The religious world adapts. Temples continue functioning, but they slowly integrate Roman influences. Statues appear showing Roman emperors dressed as pharaohs. It is a blending of identities, a quiet negotiation between tradition and survival, and Alexandria, once the shining capital of Cleopatra's reign, remains one of the most important cities in the Roman world. Its famous library had already suffered damage during earlier conflicts, possibly even during the time of Julius Caesar. But learning continues. Philosophers debate, scientists calculate, astronomers observe the stars. Egypt does not vanish, it transforms. Now pause, and imagine the Mediterranean world widening. Roman roads stretch farther, trade routes grow busier, Egyptian grain ships sail regularly toward Italy. Rome grows stronger because Egypt is stable, and in a quiet way, Cleopatra's diplomatic balancing act had delayed this moment for decades. Without her resistance, Egypt might have fallen under Roman control much earlier. History often focuses on dramatic endings, but sometimes the true story is what continues afterward. Egypt under Rome lasts for centuries, longer than Cleopatra herself ever ruled. Eventually the Roman Empire splits. Egypt becomes part of the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire. Centuries later, Arab armies arrive. Another transformation begins, but Cleopatra remains a symbolic dividing line. Before her, independent pharaohs. After her, imperial governors. Now, as your thoughts begin to soften, imagine standing on a quiet Alexandrian harbour at dusk, Roman ships anchored in rows, merchants speaking Greek, Latin, Egyptian. The lighthouse of Pharos glowing softly in the distance. The world keeps moving, even after great endings. Cleopatra's story feels dramatic, but the deeper truth is calmer. Civilizations rarely disappear overnight. They evolve, they absorb, they blend, and life continues. Take another slow breath. Feel how steady history truly is. Rulers rise, rulers fall, but rivers keep flowing, and the Nile flows exactly as it did when Cleopatra was a child, exactly as it did when Rome took control, exactly as it does now. Let that steady rhythm carry you. The story is no longer about one queen. It is about time itself, and time is very patient. Drift gently now into quiet, peaceful sleep. Take a soft breath in and let it fall away. Cleopatra is gone. Egypt is Roman. But stories are just beginning. When Augustus returned to Rome after defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he did not simply celebrate a military victory. He shaped a narrative. Rome had just endured years of civil war, Romans fighting Romans, the Republic collapsing. Augustus needed unity. He needed legitimacy. And so the story became this. Rome had not defeated fellow Romans. Rome had defeated a dangerous foreign queen. Cleopatra became the symbol of the Eastern threat. Roman poets and writers described her as exotic, manipulative, seductive, a queen who bewitched powerful Roman men. It was politically useful. If Mark Antony had simply fallen in love and lost a civil war, that would reflect poorly on Rome. But if he had been corrupted by a foreign monarch, that was easier to accept. And so Cleopatra's image began to shift. In reality, she had ruled Egypt for over 20 years. She spoke multiple languages. She managed a kingdom under constant pressure. But Roman literature reduced her to temptation, a warning, a symbol of excess. One poet, Horace, wrote about her defeat with dramatic intensity, describing her as dangerous and ambitious, yet also strangely courageous in death. Even Roman writers seemed uncertain. Was she villain or tragic queen? Over time, the political urgency faded, but the dramatic version remained. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, European scholars rediscovered classical Roman texts. Cleopatra's story returned to popularity, In 1606, William Shakespeare wrote Antony and Cleopatra. Now she became layered again, passionate, intelligent, proud, dramatic, human. The play did not portray her as simple villain. Instead, she was complex and unpredictable, larger than life. Then came paintings, opera, novels, eventually cinema. In 1963, Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, reintroduced her to the modern world. Lavish costumes, grand sets, romantic intensity. The image of Cleopatra as stunning beauty became even stronger. But something interesting happened. Modern historians began asking different questions. They returned to coins minted during her reign, ancient inscriptions, archaeological records. These sources suggested something unexpected. Cleopatra may not have fit later beauty standards at all. Ancient coins show a strong nose, a defined chin, sharp features, powerful, not delicate. Her influence likely came more from intelligence, charisma, and political strategy than from appearance. And so the myth continues evolving. Each era reshapes her. To Romans, she was a threat. To Shakespeare, she was tragic passion. To Hollywood, she was glamour. To historians today, she is a skilled ruler navigating impossible circumstances. Now pause for a moment. Imagine Cleopatra watching all of this from a distance, seeing centuries reinterpret her life. Would she be surprised, amused, frustrated? History rarely preserves people exactly as they were. It preserves what later generations need them to be. And Cleopatra became a mirror, a reflection of changing values about power, femininity, and leadership. Even today, she appears in documentaries, novels, debates. Was she Egyptian or Greek? Was she primarily strategist or romantic figure? The truth is often quieter than legend. She was a ruler trying to protect her kingdom. That alone is extraordinary. Now, as your breathing slows, imagine ancient Rome at night, torches flickering along marble streets, poets reciting verses, whispers spreading through the empire about the dramatic Queen of Egypt. And far away, along the Nile, the moon reflects on calm water. Empires move forward, but memory lingers. Cleopatra's body disappeared into history. Her tomb remains undiscovered, but her name still travels across centuries, across cultures, across imagination. Let your thoughts soften. Stories change. Legends grow. But somewhere beneath them all, there was simply a woman living in uncertain times, and that quiet truth is enough. Drift gently now into deep, peaceful sleep. Take one slow breath in and gently let it go. This is the end of our journey, but not the end of the Nile, not the end of memory. After Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, Egypt no longer stood as an independent kingdom. It became a province of Rome, and not just any province. It became the personal possession of Augustus. No Roman senator could enter Egypt without his permission. It was too important, too wealthy, too strategic. The grain from the Nile fed Rome itself. Alexandria, once the glittering capital of Cleopatra's court, remained a great city. But it was quieter now. Roman officials replaced royal advisors. Latin joined Greek in administration. Temples still stood. The sea still breathed against the harbour. But the age of pharaohs had truly ended. Cleopatra's children did not rule Egypt. Her son Caesarion, the child she claimed was the son of Julius Caesar, was executed shortly after her death. Rome would not allow a rival heir to exist. Her children with Mark Antony were taken to Rome, raised in the household of Octavia, Antony's former wife. Imagine that. The children of Cleopatra growing up in the heart of the empire that defeated her. History can be strangely poetic. Over centuries, the great monuments of ancient Egypt slowly faded into sand and silence. The famous Library of Alexandria, already damaged in earlier conflicts, eventually disappeared from history. Scrolls lost, knowledge scattered, time moved forward. Empires rose and fell. Rome itself would one day collapse, but Cleopatra's name endured. Why? Because her life stood at a crossroads. She was the last ruler of a 3,000-year-old civilization. She lived during the transformation from Roman Republic to Empire. She stood between worlds, Greek and Egyptian, Eastern and Western, ancient and imperial. Her story feels dramatic because it truly was, but beneath the drama was something very human: responsibility, pressure, uncertainty. She ruled in a time when survival required constant negotiation. Every alliance was fragile. Every decision carried risk. She could not afford weakness. She could not afford hesitation. And yet, in the quiet hours of night, she was likely simply a person, looking over the waters of the Mediterranean, listening to distant waves, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Perhaps that is why her story still comforts us in a strange way. It reminds us that even the most powerful people face uncertainty. Even queens cannot control everything, and yet they continue, one day at a time. Now imagine Alexandria one final time, the lighthouse glowing faintly, ships drifting in dark water, the desert stretching endlessly beyond the city. And somewhere within palace walls long turned to dust, a final candle flickers out, not with violence, not with spectacle, just softly. As all lights eventually do, history moves on, but you can rest. The Nile still flows, the stars still turn above ancient sands, and the story has reached its gentle end. Let your breathing slow, let your thoughts drift. Cleopatra's world has faded into quiet, and now, so can you. Sleep peacefully,